Yeah, we belong to Jesus Christ.
I love that theme song for the Weebies. I don't know about you, but I love hearing it before I get to preach, because it reminds me also who I am as well. And so it's just kind of like one of those things. It's like, to me, it's better than AC/DC coming on and playing right before I get up to preach. You know, it gets me going, because it kind of centralizes what we do as a church. And so we've been kind of wrestling together. Why church? I mean, and I don't know if you've ever asked the question or not, because I'm fairly certain that if you're here today, that you probably have wrestled with, on a Sunday morning, should I even go to a place that we call church? I belong to God. So why go to a place, right? I mean, why are these buildings, and it seems like that some of them are immaculate, some of them seem like that they worship in open, people gather together under a pavilion. If you went to the Philippines in the recent months, that you've seen them underneath makeshift tents or bamboo sticks, and it just seems like that they're just vast and array of an assortment of people, and it seems like that it's a vast array of even shapes of buildings, for that matter. But millions of people in the last 24 hours, including across spanning the globe, have met together with the purpose to worship. I think I would just propose to you, I would hope that has kind of been the forefront of Sunday morning activity for around 2,000 years, was the intent to simply create a worship service. Let's gather together and let's give alms to the one. Let's give authority, and let's surrender a moment in time in which that we could say all together corporately, let's try to magnify and lift God as high as we possibly can. There was a guy, his name was Mike Rocchio. And he wrote for the Chicago Tribune. He wrote about a guy by the name of Bill Mallory. And there was different country roads that had these Chevron gas stations. And along the most roads traveled, that they would put up these signs that say, if you're traveling, ask us anything. And so people would come expecting that whenever they would read that, it's about, where should we go? Right? It's the question that whenever they saw that if they were lost, or if they wanted to know what's the nearest attraction, that they would stop at a Chevron gas station and they would ask the gas attendant a particular question about the journey that they are on. Now really, I would say the heart of the issue was for the Chevron gas station was to draw people inside so that they would buy a candy bar, pop, and stuff like that. But Bill Mallory was really wrestling with a question. He was really wrestling with the question of, what's the purpose of life? And as he's traveling down these roads where he sees these gas stations and the sign that would say, ask us any question, he would go from gas station to gas station and he would ask, he says, I've got a question. He would ask the question, that sign out there to ask us anything. He says, I've got a question. I'm really wrestling with it. What is the purpose and meaning of life? And he would get a vast array of responses from each of the gas attendants. One person would say, he said, I just have been working here for about a week. They didn't give me a manual. He'd go to the next one. He says, what is the purpose of life? And the gas attendant said this, I'm not much for church either. And Bill was kind of thought, why was that his response? Because he didn't ask a question about church. He was asking, what's the meaning of life? He'd ask another gas attendant further down the road, what is the meaning of life? And he says, you know what, I just don't know. He says, maybe you could write the gas station, maybe you could write to corporate office, and maybe that they could answer your question for you, but as far as I'm concerned, I don't know. People normally just ask questions like, where is the next truck stop or hotel or something like that? So Bill took him up on his offer. He began to write a long, eloquent letter to Chevron Gas Company, and he would, as he wrote it, he says, to whoever receives this letter, he says, I've been traveling to all your gas stations and been asking the same question over and over again, and I come up wanting. He says, I'm wondering if there's anybody in your office that could answer the question, what is the purpose and meaning of life? He sends it in the mail, and he waits a couple of weeks, and a letter comes back. He says, thank you for your inquiry. He says, I'm just wondering, if there's somebody else that we can ask for you. And he responds back to it. He says, no, I think that you've answered the question that I need. He says, thank you. And he was just very, very kind of saddened by the response. I don't know why he was asking the gas company to answer this question. He thought that the conversation would end just then and there. But after 2 weeks, after that, he sent the letter back. After 2 weeks, he got another letter in the mail from the Chevron Gas Company. And he's like, I wonder what this is about. He opens it up, and he says, you've been pre-approved for a $2,000 credit card. And he thought to himself, is this the purpose of life? Is this the meaning of life? Is to, maybe for the Chevron Gas Company, for money? Is that the pursuit? Is that the pursuit of trying to draw people in? Is that the pursuit in which that he was looking for? You know, I have to ask the question for you and I, what is the purpose of all this? What's the meaning of all this? Why did you get up today and most of you got up out of your pajamas? It's okay if you didn't. If you came today, I'm not trying to single you out if you're here in your pajamas. I'm not making eye contact with anybody. But I think that there's a lot to say about having to ask the question, why are we here? Why are we here? And I need to ask those questions right up front. And I would say that God is concerned about that. God's concerned about why that we gather. Emma, follow along with me. Exodus chapter 20, God is concerned with a particular mode of worship from the very get-go. It says this in Exodus 23 through 5. It says this, you shall have no other gods before me. From the very get-go, and whenever he started trying to organize this gathering, he was very concerned about making sure that we did not have dualistic love, that we would not be taken back or focused on anything other than he himself, because he himself is God. And he would say, verse 4, you shall not make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven above or on earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. Worship. Everybody worships. Everyone worships. You and I are created to worship. We have this inclination of us. We can't help ourselves. It's what we do. It's what we're designed to do. It's worship. We worship something. We worship somebody, no matter what. Whatever captivates our hearts, affections, the mind, attention, and the soul's ambition essentially has our worship. We worship everything from pop icons to whoever's number one on the BCS polls to a NBA basketball team or a person that seems to be very popular. We have a tendency, I know this might seem very political for you, but I'm just saying it's not, because I'm talking about worshiping the Lord your God first alone. You might put your hope and trust in our government. You might put your hope and trust on who sits upon the president's seat. But I can tell you that can take the place of our affection towards God. We ourselves can pursue fame. We can pursue worship. We can pursue love. We can pursue someone. And God is concerned with where our affections turn to. From the very beginning of creation, He was concerned because we are inclined to worship. We are made to be worship machines. God has uniquely designed us with meaning and purpose, and He divinely created us in His own image. And when we worship the Creator, not only the Creator, we don't worship the Creator, I think that we end up feeling unfulfilled and we desire something else. When we pursue it and we capture it, what else is there? We go after something else. And that becomes our attention. Sometimes we are the ones. We don't really recognize it, but sometimes we are the ones that end up becoming the God. But God's truth, excuse me, God is the only one who is worthy.
Amen.
Sorry, guys. And so I wonder, what attention do you go to? Psalms 115. It says this: "Why do nations say, 'Where is their God?' Our God is in heaven, and He does whatever pleases Him. But their idols are silver and gold, made by the hands of men. They have mouths, but cannot speak, eyes, but they cannot see. They have ears, but cannot hear, noses, but they cannot smell. They have hands, but cannot feel. They have feet, but cannot walk. Nor can they utter a sound with their throats. Neither can Cason." But listen to this. "Those who make them, as far as idols are concerned, will be like them. And so will all who put their trust in them." I want to propose to you something today, okay? I love it. There's no other couple in the world that I've seen this more than Barbara and Earl. I think that they've lived for so long that Barbara is either the female version of Earl, or Barbara's the male version of Earl. I mean, they've lived so long together, it seems like they belong together. You can't separate them. They begin kind of taking on the same type of attributes, you know? And I love that. I love that about them. And I'm hoping that Cassandra one day starts looking like me. No, that's not at all what I hope for at all. And I don't hope to look more like her, but I think ultimately it's kind of this test. I don't know about you, but I know that these, thank you very much. Love you.
Amen.
I don't know if you've ever told your kids this, but you are what you eat, right? And I never got that, you know, other than until that I'm older. You know, I was like, I don't want to become broccoli. You know, I just don't want to become it. You know, if it's in the refrigerator too long, you open the refrigerator and it stinks. You know, and I know that, and I don't want to become nature's broom, for that matter. You know, that's what they say about broccoli. Anyway, I digress. But you know, essentially what it comes down to is that if you feed your body a certain thing, that you become healthy. If you eat healthy things, you become healthy. You know, if you eat unhealthy things, you become unhealthy. You become what you eat. And let me just submit something today. We are constantly in the mode of becoming, especially with the thought of worship. Whatever that you place your trust, whatever you place your affection, we are constantly in the mode of becoming. And we are becoming what we worship. Psalm says this very eloquently. Those who make them will be like them. And so will all who put their trust in them. Wherever that your affection and your attention goes to, you become what you worship. Okay? You see this, I see this more with OU fans than I do OSU fans, by the way. You know, no. Especially whenever it deals with worship, okay? That if you're an OU fan, that's okay. But if you worship OU football, you become OU football, right? I mean, it's just like you're going to defend it. You're going to talk about it. That is where your affection goes to. Nobody talks bad about my sports team. You know, I had this thought. You know, I think that this was kind of an interesting thought. I was like, you know, there's one thing. Sermon writing can be hard. Very hard, especially if you're not associated with the Word of God on a regular basis, if you're not consuming it. But I can tell you one thing, if you're consuming something else, I find myself one day, whenever I'm meeting a stranger, I talk to them about my gluten-free diet. It became really easy to bring this conversation up. You know, why didn't my conversation go to God is love, and He loves you and I? No, I say, hey, guess what? I had a life change. My diet was completely different. I don't eat bread anymore. You know, and I can sit and talk to somebody about, you know, philosophies of diets and stuff like that. I'm just thinking, what in the world? Why in the world has my attention turned to that? I am becoming something. We're constantly in the mode of becoming, and we are becoming what we worship. And I guess the question that we have to ask today is, what are you becoming?
Amen.
You got to answer the question. I mean, I'll propose the question. You don't have to answer it out loud, but I think it would do us some justice today if you would say, you know, I was here to worship because Kason told me to. Or Barbara and Earl invited me today. And maybe, just maybe, that our attention goes to, I'm going to honor, you know, I talked to you a little bit about, you know, we've been doing a lot of hand clapping for people. I don't know what it looks like, and this is kind of improv. But I mean, like, can we give God some glory? I mean, can we just like, praise you, God? Yeah. I mean, lift your hands, right? I mean, I'm glad that was better than any hand clap that we got for any other person today. Because it's my hope that you're not becoming like Kason. Because if your affection and your attention goes to, I'm following a man, you're going to become like that particular man. There's a passage of Scripture that says, put your hope and trust in those idols and watch them fall. Put your hope and trust in Kason Oaks. Watch him fall. Put your hope and trust in a denomination and watch it fall. If it's God alone, I believe that there's a place for you in worship no matter what, and a place that if we're devoted to God, He will never fall. And I have to wonder to myself, what did the early church do? I mean, I had to look at that because it seems like that they had the books of the Bible written after them. Acts chapter 2, it says this, and starting with verse 42, it says this: they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to the fellowship and to the breaking of bread and to prayer. And let me just tell you, before I start chasing rabbits, there's a lot that we could say about this. But just this is what they did, okay? This was the nature of the gathering, okay? They devoted themselves to it. Just in the word devoted, I wonder if you start hearing worship words. I wonder if it's maybe what we are actually devoted to. And then it goes on to say, everyone was filled with awe, and many wonders and miraculous signs were done by the apostles, and all the believers were together and had everything in common. You want to know what unified them? To God be the glory. And He was glorified through His Son, Jesus Christ, who was crowned with glory and honor because He was crucified and He died for the sins of the world, and He was crowned with glory because He was buried, and on the third day He rose again, and He's not dead, He is alive. Therefore He is forever to be praised, and that glory goes on forever and ever and ever. Amen? They had that in common. And because of that, there was a response to it. They began selling their possessions and goods, and they gave to anyone as he had need. And every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts, and they broke bread in their homes, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts. And look what they did, praising God and enjoying the favor of all people. The favor of all people that comes from what unifies them in the Spirit. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. I got to tell you, we could spend a lot of time in just this passage. But do you know what you worship is what you do? It's your behavior mechanism. It's if I'm completely enthralled by something, I spend my investments, my time and energy into it, and I put my hope and trust in this. In the very beginning, there's this thing called the Shema. It says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. And later Jesus says in Matthew chapter 22, verse 37 and 38, it says, Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with your heart and with your soul and with your mind. And this is the first and greatest commandment. In the same way, in Mark chapter 12, 28 through 30, it says, one of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he has said, of all the commandments, what's most important? He says, the most important one, answered Jesus, is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength. And in other words, there's a target. There's a target on you and I. And it comes from our thought life. It comes from what captures our attention and our affection. It's almost like the target is somewhere deep down inside. And what Jesus is saying is that whoever that you are becoming, is at the center of your life. And at that center of your life should be the love for God. Nothing should take the place of that. This is the greatest commandment. If you can do this, if this is something in which that you can capture, you can fulfill the laws of God. Paul goes on to say, this is the way that it kind of fleshes itself out in Romans chapter 12. He says this, he says, therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. It's in everything that you do. You offer yourself, your physical body, your entire being. It's not just a service that is set aside for an hour. Don't just think that for one moment that you worship God entirely if you just make the check mark and say, I came to worship service on a Sunday morning at the Watonga Church of the Nazarene, and I spent about 30 minutes listening to a service. I listened to about a few songs, and I praised God. I got an email, and I didn't get a permission to ask to use this, and so I'm not going to use the name, but there was a few years ago, I got an email, and it was a testimony. They didn't know that they were writing a testimony, but they were ministering to me. They said, I wanted to let you know, Kason, that I have been dealing with bitterness. There's been a change that has happened in church. There's been a shift that has happened in church, and I've seen it through generations and generations. I remember sitting in a Sunday morning service not too long ago, and I remember thinking to myself, and just folding my arms and becoming almost mad. There wasn't a single song that I recognized. I didn't know the words to any of the songs. And I became more mad and more mad. He said, for that matter, he said, she said, he said, I'm not saying. I never had heard some of the scriptures before, and I didn't relate to them. And you said something about offering, Kason, and it really struck a chord with me. And I just seemed like that everything, I just wanted to get up and I wanted to leave the service because I didn't enjoy anything that was happening. And I had to ask myself, what was I there for? And he said, I'll stop doing that. But they said, I remember there was a moment in time that as I was ready to just not ever try anymore. That I remember there became a shift of attitude that it was almost like that God said to me, the worship service is not about you.
Amen.
Whenever it becomes about you, it will fail. And so this particular person told me that my attitude of worship changed. I was open to whatever was going on there, and I began to notice how it began to speak to some other people. And I remember seeing other people raise their hands, and I began to notice things, and I began to notice not just about the elements in the service, but I began to notice God. I began to notice that I was at the center of my affections. It became about what I want and what I desired. It is as if the God was saying, we don't worship you. Well, that's a hard pill to swallow. I don't know about you, but it would be a hard pill for me to swallow if God came to me and said, it's not about you, Kason. But do you not know that that's the idol in which that I have to fight off each and every day? Whenever Paul says, offer your bodies as living sacrifices, it means that every single day, whenever I walk out there, am I a living sacrifice? Everything that I do, everything in which that comes along my way, where's my affection? Where's my attention? And sometimes I have to say, no, Kason, it's not about you. It's not about you. It's all about God. Matthew chapter 4, Jesus says it very plainly. Matthew chapter 4, verse 9 and 10, he says, all this I will give you. He said, this is Satan saying this to Jesus when he's being tempted in the desert. He says, all this I will give you, he said, if you will just bow down and worship me. Jesus in the flesh had the same type of, and I find so much relief in this. Jesus had the same temptation in which that I face each and every day, where he says, Jesus said to him, away from me, Satan, for it's written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. Because here's the deal. Whenever you bow down and worship, you become what you worship. Romans 1, 24 and 25, and there's a lot in this passage of Scripture that we just don't have time for. But Romans 1, 24 through 25, Paul says it so eloquently. He says that, therefore, God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity for degrading of their bodies to one another. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and they worship and serve created things rather than the Creator, who is forever praised. Amen. And I want you to hear me correctly. The topic of this particular, the subject of this particular passage of Scripture is idol worship. They worshiped and served created things. Oh, goodness. They worshiped and they served. The subject is idol worship. And this is not a product. This is who we are. The God says this is how he behaves. He doesn't strike people down. He is not in active pursuit of people of that. You know that God always has to contend with idol worship. I think it's silly that God has to fight off these things in which that we've created with our own hands. God is always He's in pursuit of you and I. But he is not in active pursuit of trying to, he's not in active pursuit of trying to punish. This is how God is active in it. You want it, you can have it. You want that, you can have it. But see where it gets you. You want to worship that God? See where that God gets you. God is he still pursues you and he still loves you, even if you're in the pursuit of some type of idol. But if you are pursuing some type of idol, he will let you have it. Not like he's going to let you have it, but he'll give you what you want. This is a quote from A.W. Tozer. I love reading some of his writings because there's nobody that writes like this anymore. God wants worshipers before workers. I'm about to really step on some other idol, okay? You ready? You ready to reveal your idol? God wants worshipers before workers. Indeed, the only acceptable workers are those who have learned the lost art of worship. The very stones would praise Him if the need arose, and 1,000 legions of angels would leap to do His will. Spiritual worship comes first. I don't know about you, but sometimes there's a couple of Sundays ago that I was talking about, my cookies. I'll go, I don't do the most, but I do some. Actually, I don't do the most, but I do a lot. And I think that sometimes in which that I become a part of that behavior in which that I'm going to work, and maybe that I will find the approval of man or even the approval of God, but if I was honest with you, in which that I hope that I am, it's about the approval of you all. That if I do and do, then maybe that this young 36-year-old would get some respect. And I don't know, that might be another idol, respect. But there's a story that reminds me of Jesus is being hosted by what we would assume of a couple of women that have come across some money. And she's hosting, Mary and Martha are hosting this get-together, and they invite Jesus. And Jesus is in the building. And Martha is doing. She is preparing food. She is wiping down the counters, and she is making sure that everybody's comfortable. And you want to know where Sister Mary is? She's down at the foot of Jesus, and she's just listening to anything in which that might come from the mouth of truth. And I can just hear Martha just kind of slamming cabinets and huffing and puffing in the kitchen and just like, it's hot in here. It's like, I wish I could use some help. Things like that, which we all do whenever we're doing. And then finally it gets to a boiling point in which she comes out and says, Jesus, you're just going to let her sit there? There's a lot of stuff that can be done. And Jesus looks at Martha and says, Martha, Martha, you are concerned about a lot of things that Mary's only concerned about one thing, and she chose wisely. See, worship comes before work, and if we reverse the order, work can become our idol. We can spend a lot of time mopping the floors or volunteering for this or being a part of the church and just saying, ultimately, I'm here whenever the doors are open. But if we've lost the art of worship, what are we doing? Because I believe the church was made to worship together. Matthew chapter 15. It says, some of the Pharisees and teachers of the law came to Jesus from Jerusalem and asked, why do your disciples break the tradition of the elders? They don't wash their hands before they eat. Jesus replied, why do you break the command of God for the sake of your tradition? For God said, honor your father and mother, and anyone who curses his father or mother must be put to death. But you say, if a man says to his father or mother, whatever help that you might otherwise have received from me is a gift devoted to God. He is not to honor his father with it. Thus, you nullify the word of God for the sake of your tradition. You hypocrites! Isaiah was right whenever he prophesied about you. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain, but their teachings are but rules taught by men. He was concerned about the inner being. He's not talking about the exterior thing of how that we do it, how do we organize ourselves, anything like that. Really what he is saying is that if we lose the focus upon honoring and magnifying God where He belongs, then we reverse the order. The exterior starts becoming more important than the heart. And this is what it says in Isaiah. This was the passage in which that Jesus was referring to. In the year King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord seated on a throne, high and exalted, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above them were seraphim, each 6 wings, and 2 wings that they covered their faces, 2 wings in which they covered their feet, and the other 2 that they were flying. And they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is filled with His glory. And the sound of their voices, the doorpost and the threshold shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. Woe to me, I cried. I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips. I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Then one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with the tongs from the altar. With it he touched my mouth and said, See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away and your sin is atoned for. Let me tell you what, God is concerned about what happens on the inside. You can clean, you can wash your hands clean, but nothing that you can do can cleanse what's internal. Let me tell you something. I just got some affirmation yesterday. We had a garage sale, and there's a lady that came. She didn't buy a single thing, and you might know this lady, but she told me, I was introducing herself, and she said, "Be sure you tell so-and-so hi." And I said, "Who's so-and-so?" She says, "Is this not so-and-so's house?" I said, "No, this is the parsonage of the Nazarene Church. It's been that way since it was built." And she's like, "Oh, I thought this was so-and-so's house." I said, "No, I'm the pastor at the Nazarene Church. You probably have saw me whenever you've attended most funerals that happen here in our community." And she's like, yeah, you got a hat on. You know, that's you're in disguise today." And I was like, "Yeah." And I said, "Where do you worship? Where do you go?" And she began to tell me some different things. She says, "But I want to tell you something. I've seen the Lord." She says, "And boy, I've got a story." And I said, "Well, it's just you and I." I said, "I would love to hear your story." And she says, "Well, I had," did she say a stroke? Bypass surgery. And she says, I died. And she said, I went to see God. And she said, God showed me the stars. And He told me that I was a child of Abraham, that I was one of the children in which that I promised Abraham that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars. And she said, and I was just in awe of Him. And she said, and you want to know what? She said, and God took me through the mercy seat. God took me to the mercy seat. And you want to know what He did? He took out a live coal and He placed it up on my lips. And she began to weep. And she said, God cleansed me of my sin. Amen. And I said, sister, I said, you were ministering to me. I said, this is no coincidence. I said, tomorrow I'm going to be using that particular reference in my sermon. I said, I've got it written down right here, you know, and I said, you're ministering to me. And I said, this is not a coincidence. I said, this is amazing. I said, because your story is a story that continues to be written for anybody that has ever worshiped God. And it's a story that continues to be told. The story that was told for Isaiah is your story as well. You know that He wants, although that you and I might not feel worthy to even utter His name, there might be certain things that come to your mind. I am without honor. I am not worthy. I cannot approach the mercy seat of God. God says, I want to cleanse you and I want to make you worthy. Not because of anything that you've done, because of what I have done already. It's good news. It's been spoken, and it's for you and I as well. Psalms 34, I'll leave you with this here. Psalms 34:3, it says this, glorify the Lord with me. Let us exalt His name together. I think what we do here is just a good practice service. I think that we are practicing something. You and I are practicing because that if we are living examples, if we're walking sacrifices, if we are living sacrifices of worship, this simply is a practice service for whenever we walk outside these doors, because we practice together what it means to worship. And so we're going to respond today by just simply asking the question and singing a responsive song. What are you becoming? What are you pursuing? Is there something that you're becoming that is not God? You and I were made in His image, and we were created to become more and more like Him, and He has given us everything that we need to pursue Him and become more like Him. Created in His image, and I believe that through His Spirit that we are becoming more into His likeness. We are made to worship. You worship something, it might as well be the one that will never fail you. I invite you to stand to your feet as we sing one song together.